Hey guys, so this is going to be a quick one. If you hear any weird noises, it's my beverage cooler right here. I bought one recently. So the compressor's, let me check. I believe the compressor's on. Maybe, I can't tell at this very moment. Based on the wattage that I'm using. But anyways, if you hear any kind of noises or bangs, it's from my compressor over here. From my beverage cooler. So something occurred to me the other day that I was thinking about it, and I was thinking, what if the Union, after the Civil War, it was the Union, through the 14th Amendment, is where that became the United States we know today, or the definition of the United States we know today. And I think when you watch that video, I remembered that when I was saying things, it was leading in that direction. Like I was saying, State of the Union and all of that. Yeah. So I wanted to check, and I already did this before I did the video. Spoiler alert. But it's what I suspected. What is the Retrocession Act? The Retrocession Act of 1846. Oh wait. No, the Reconstruction Act. Basically what this did was make Virginia a Virginia Republic. So yeah, we've talked about that, and it does play a role in the Union and all that in the 14th Amendment. What is the I meant to say Reconstruction Act. Series of laws passed Reconstruction Acts. Series of laws passed by Congress over President Andrew Johnson's veto that outlined the terms for readmitting former Confederate states into the Union. And eventually it wasn't just the Confederate states, it was all states. At the time, it was 37 states. They divided the South into I believe, I'm not entirely sure. So we hear the North Confederate and all that, Union, Confederates and all that. Okay, this writing here is not entirely correct. So I don't know if all of the states of the North were with the Union. I'm sure that they would have to be formalized and accept that they were against the South. But here it says that only the terms for readmitting states into the Union. So if we get rid of that, you say get rid of this and put readmitting states into the Union. The United States Constitution doesn't define what a state is. We talked about all that. So it's not readmitting. They divided the South into 5 military districts governed by martial law to ensure black suffrage, protect civil rights, and enforce the 14th Amendment. Now, here's where things get loopy. The 10 southern states, excluding Tennessee, were divided into 5 districts, each under control of a military commander, responsible for maintaining order and protecting citizens' rights. So this becomes who's a citizen. So instead of just having enslaved people become citizens of the Union, everyone had to become citizens of the Union. And that's what United States citizenship is. It's not the United States of the Constitution. It's citizens of the Union as defined by the Reconstruction Act. I would say Retrocession Act, but it's the Reconstruction Act or acts. Readmission requirements. To rejoin the Union, which they were never part of the Union to begin with, states had to draft new constitutions approved by Congress and congressmen, so they were being accepted into the Union. Ratify the 14th Amendment, of course, granting citizenship to freed people. But the irony is that when they did that, they lost their ability to be free themselves, It's interesting because everyone, like, even an enslaved person who was no longer a slave, they were freed, but they were a different kind of freed than what the people who had, well, I want to say people who had slaves because they were slaves that had slaves, but I'm trying to not use the word white people. People who were not slaves to begin with, let's say, they were forced to have citizenship with the people who were enslaved by the Union. So we're just all part of the same citizenship regardless. Make sense? And guarantee voting rights for all men regardless of race. So before, I'd imagine, based on how this is worded right here, even people who were freed, who were not classified as United States citizens, because the U.S. Constitution did not define what a citizen was, then would that say that they didn't have voting rights for all people? Like was that like you could become a U.S. citizen or become United States citizen if you wanted to become part of the political system? Was that a type of citizenship before the Union came along? I don't know, but there had to be some sort of process there or something. Maybe you had to be like live in Maryland or Virginia, well, prior to retrocession, where you could be part of the Congress and all of that. So it wasn't United States a country, it's more like United States the political battleground, which that doesn't sound too bad. But now they've made it the entire United States is part of the Union, the United States. It's all political now. Crazy times. It's always been crazy. Says disfranchisement of Confederates. Former Confederate officials were barred from voting or holding office, aimed at reducing their influence over the new loyal governments. To the Union. Not the United States itself, but the Union under... you know what I'm saying. The Union that calls itself the United States. Reinforcing rights. These acts were designed to protect the rights of 4 million freed men, formerly enslaved individuals. It does that, but at the same time, it makes everyone else who wasn't part of the United States in that political sphere now part of the Union, which influenced everything else, and ensure that Southern states protected them from discriminatory laws. The acts were passed because Congress deemed President Johnson's lenient approach to the South to be inadequate for protecting the rights of freedmen and for assuring loyalty from the former Confederacy. By 1870, all Southerners had been readmitted under these terms. I would say that I'm sure that President Andrew Johnson, I've never heard what he had to say about it, but I think there was something in there that us people would say that he supported um, the states being independent from the government. But of course, it was going to be outnumbered anyways because you had all the 4 million people versus the southern people at the time. I don't even think that possibly maybe a little less or a little more than 4 million people were were part of the territories and they weren't slaved. So either the enslaved individuals were the people who were freed. They were either the majority or they were the minority, and it's hard to tell which one of those it would be. It, I don't know. I think it ultimately became an act of Congress to do it. But of course, Virginia knew they wanted retrocession because they figured there was going to be a civil war that was coming. So they had foresight. So when they retroceded, they became a republic on their own. Now, today they're part of the Union, but they still have that republic in them. And we talked about that with national security. Yeah, readmission to the Union ratified, and they had to ratify the 14th Amendment. So the 14th Amendment just referenced itself through the Reconstruction Act, and I figured that was true, because the stuff that it talks about here is not in the Constitution. The 14th Amendment, in a way, the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, in a way, is an amendment to amend the Constitution itself and replace it with another document. Yeah, so this is why the Reconstruction Act has more power than the U.S. Constitution. It does. Let me think. What else? Now, I'm sure that there will be many people who would ask, wasn't the United States federal government, or how that worked, wasn't that the Union? Yes. I'm going to have to Google that. But another thing that during the Civil War, you actually had Great Britain was on the side of the South, and you had the Russians. They were on the side of the North. So if the North ever failed, they would have Russians as backup. Most people don't know that. They were I forget the word. I forget the word they use. Great Britain was, I think they used the word sympathetic. I think that's the word, of the South. I said, was the Union of the Civil War of the United States? The Union during the Civil War was the United States of America, the federal government, and the loyal northern border states. They fought to preserve the nation against the seceding southern states. The Union represented the pre-war federal government and territory. Now what we have... Now let's think about this. You have to define what federal government is in that. I think there's two... It's possible there's two different unions. The federal union and... What would the other union be? You're gonna have to define federal government to me in that. Are you talking about the Congress, Supreme Court, and the president as the federal government. I don't know. Tons of Civil War. It's possible that. I gotta think about this for a second. It's possible that part of the Federal War, the Civil War, the federal government and the U.S. government, they were the same. Well, no, that couldn't have been true because of the Retrocession Act. The Retrocession Act separated. Congress was given control of D.C. Retrocession gave it to Virginia. So now you had the opportunity where the federal government and the U.S. Democratic Republic could be two separate entities. And the U.S. Constitution does allude to a federal government that delegates its power to the Congress, Supreme Court, and President, which is the executive branch. But there's a power above that, which you would call the federal government today. But it's alluded to in the Constitution in hindsight, which that would be what your federal government would see. So the federal national security would see. So what national security sees is they just go by airports, international airports in the United States. So when people pass through airports, they're temporary citizens of that airport. They operate as countries. And from there, they don't look at people as U.S. citizens. They don't look at people as European citizens. They see it as people, whoever is there is part of the world citizenship. Everyone has a place equally. So they look at the 14th Amendment, but it's a different interpretation of the 14th Amendment. And and here's the thing about national security. They have the NSC, the National Security Council. It has its own people divided amongst many different agencies, and Congress. And when Congress is active, the NSC operates as a judiciary, so it acts as the Supreme Court to the United States Constitution within Congress. So they have equal power as Congress does, but within the lining of the Supreme Court. So if you have them operating international airports, they can reinterpret whatever law gets passed through Congress can be reinterpreted as something to put in international airports in the United States of the Union, in the territory of the Union. So yeah, there's that. So by that, the national security state has more power to fill the void of the federal government that it's alluding to, that delegates its power to executive, Supreme Court, and Congress through those same metrics. It also says okay, this is interesting. It says, before the American Civil War, the United States was known as the United States Federal Union. I've never heard of that term. A union of states controlled by the federal government. A union of states. You're going to have to... State is not defined. Controlled by the federal government. So if we're using the old rules, so let's say that's true. It is Wikipedia, but let's say that's true. Which, in modern days, it could actually be true. More true now than it was back then. A union of states. So let's say Republican political parties, states like state of Texas, state of Minnesota, all of them Um, all these states are controlled by the federal government within this union. Let's say that. And the federal government, if it is the national security state, then it can, well, you wouldn't say national security state, you would say national security through the Republic of Virginia. They would be controlled by them, not Congress, by them. Now you could say it was Congress under the Constitution, but not under the Reconstruction Act. So federal government in this case would be national security, and they would control all the states, all the political parties, and all of that. That's what it would look like in the modern day, if we take this at face value. Why is the United States government called the Union? So the United States government. So what does that make different than the federal government? See, you see there's two governments here. And the Union is just the foundation of the United States. And then they ratified the 14th that gave them more power, took away the freedom of the states, the state of Texas and all that. So if someone wears a Confederate flag, just because it's heritage and stuff, I could understand someone wearing that to try to create a discussion and conversation about the truth of the Union. But then again, if you do that, then you're removing the people who were enslaved, who were not represented, and they had no place to go. Technically speaking, you would call those people illegals, who will, but because they were on the territory of these states that were going to be moved into the Union, then they would be called citizens. So they were assimilated into the country. The territory, how you want to say it, the political powers of the territory of America. Let's see that. I think that's maybe more accurate than. But at the same time, no, we gotta go back because I want to talk about something else. What was the? So I want to talk about these things as well. So it said 5 military districts and protect civil rights, enforce. So military districts, and if you read this. Okay, here. 5 military districts, each under the control of a military commander responsible for maintaining order and protecting citizens' rights. That was but here's where it transitions into the United States Constitution. This is the part where the states become property of the U.S. Constitution, and it defines through the Reconstruction Act. It reinterprets what the Constitution says. So, who is the military commander of the United States? And this would be the president. The U.S. military commander structure is topped by the President, Commander-in-Chief, and the Secretary of Defense. Now, the Secretary of Defense, that would be part of the national security. We got to Google that. I'm going to Google that. Who direct all armed forces, key Joint Chiefs of Staff such as General. Yeah, and these people would be a part of the National Security Council. No doubt about that. So, Commander-in-Chief is President of the United States. In 1947 National Security Act. Yeah, that's what I figured. Security and Defense was created under National Security Act. So yeah, they're part of the executive branch. They're the parallel government, and that's where it goes. So they own their own military and all that under the guise of the United States. So what you have here is you have a union that has democracy and all that, and you have the national security state. I'm sorry for saying state. National security, which has its parallel government that imitates that one, that fills, the executive, judicial, and legislative. Which in national security, that would be your CIA would be executive, security and defense is on top of that. That would be your Congress. That would be your legislative, and then you have your NSC, which is your judicial. The National Security Council acts as the Supreme Court. Created the position of security defense with authority to establish general policies and programs for the national military establishment, or the NME, enemy, which is what they call the Department of War today. Well, they called it Department of War before, but it's still the Department of Defense. Because the Department of War was not as big as it is now. We went through this. It's a whole complicated thing. I think it was before it was called enemy. So yeah. So what side do you? Well, I don't want to say it's a side, but who do you want represent? Who do you feel represents your views? Do you think it's the union? Do you think we should all be part of the union and serve the union and have all these passports, these IDs, and all this? And say I'm a United States citizen, which you're really saying you're the union, a union member, or would you want something like the national security that says everyone's a global citizen? You guys already know where I stand on that. If you don't know, I'll just say it like this. After my passport got burned up, I don't even want a passport. Like, even before, like, right after my passport got burned up, I was like, I don't want to present my case and try to get another one and go through USPS and all that. I was like, I'm done with that. It was a sign that my passport got burned and all that. Sure, I would like to travel, but, travel out of the union, but, it's fine, I guess. Although I could travel to Canada on my ID by going through land, but other than that, no, I mean, I would like to go to other countries, but I don't want a passport to do it. Now with all this, I'm like, I don't even want one. Now I really don't want one. I have a reason to decide why I don't want one. United States of America. More like the Union of America. I don't work for the Union. I don't work for the national security either. But I'm more aligned with the national security part of it. Yeah, the War Department was created in 1789. How the War Department became the Department of Defense. So I think that's the War Department. Yeah, it was before enemy, and yeah, it didn't have all the structure the military has today. You know, the Marines, um, the Navy, Army. Is it Army, the Marines? I don't remember. Well, those two different things. But I know that it wasn't as diverse as it is today. For one, they didn't have any helicopters or. I think that's the Army. Or is it the Marines? I know the Marines are the tough ones. But so are the Navy SEALs. Navy SEALs is harder than. What? Anyways, yeah, all I'm saying is it's not as diverse as Department of War. I mean, Department of War is not as diverse as it is today. Um, which makes you wonder. Well, if the United States ever falls, then what happens to the U.S. Coast Guard? Because they have the name U.S. in front of the title. The best thing I can say is get out of the water. Get out of the water. Get out of the oceans. Yeah, I'm not going to give you a reason to get out of the water. Well, the Coast Guard is irrelevant. But yeah, that was when I was thinking about that. I thought about that a few months ago. Like, what happens to the U.S. Coast Guard? Does it just become Coast Guard? Yeah, it says Army, Air Force, and Marines. So I think they would be different. Um, so it says the President of the United States serves as Commander in Chief and exercises authority over the armed forces through the DoD and for the Coast Guard in peacetime. So again, it's from Wikipedia, but I would consider maybe that's true because the president, because now we have a national security, we don't need a president to serve during wartime. But the only one who can declare war is Congress. However, there's been a few exceptions to that rule. I think Congress only um, declared war. I think it was 11 times. You can check it. There's a whole thing on Congress. How many times did the U.S. declare war? Yeah, it declared war 11 times against 10 foreign nations across 5 separate major wars. The last during World War II. The Korean Wars, fun fact, the Korean War and the Vietnam Wars, it says it right here. I already knew that. I was going to bring this up. Even though they have war in the name, it was not declared as war under Congress. Yeah, you can read about it at the Senate.gov. War on 11 occasions, and it tells you all the dates right here. It even gives you the Senate votes and all that. So, yeah, so it's interesting because we have a federal government or something building up into a federal government, and we have the Democratic Republic of the United States government, which is called the Union. And to most people, these are all the same thing. These are all part of the Union. However, that's not entirely true. In fact, I've told you that wasn't true. Um, International airports would be the place. Those would be the ports of entry. Now, you could use cruise ships, but more people would be going through airports than cruise ships. And you'd have a lot more diversity going through airports. I think the main ones that I know that cruise ships go to would be Mexico, the Caribbean, which would be Jamaica, and Italy. I think there's a few minor ones, but I think those are the three big ones. Oh, and Alaska. Well, no, Alaska is the United States. Um, but if you would, but that would be a main. That's a main entry point. Main entry departure point. Maybe not departure, but definitely entry point would be Alaska. So you got Alaska, Italy, Mexico, which Cancun, Jamaica, and if you want to count Florida and Texas, Galveston, Texas, then you could count those. But I don't know any other country. Does it? Yeah. Um, I don't know of any other country outside of those. I couldn't even think of any. I don't know. I haven't been on a cruise ship before. I've wanted to, but then COVID happened, so that plan changed. Um, but I still went to Ukraine after I did a lot of traveling during COVID, but I just didn't go on a cruise ship. I went to Ukraine in 2021 and all that. But yeah, um, but yeah, at the end of the day, at the end of the day, after all this takes place, the ones who take down the Union, who we call the Union today, the United States government, we got the federal government, which takes, and of course you're gonna have a civil war, but it's not gonna be a civil war between, and we've talked about this, that isn't between Democrats or Republicans. It's gonna be a war with the conservatives, because there's gonna have to become a point where the people who support the Constitution, but yet go against national security, but support the being a United States citizen and all that, and fighting for the 14th and all of that, and the understanding of the United States government and the Union and the Reconstruction Act. I'm trying to prevent myself from saying Retrocession Act, but the Reconstruction Act. All those people all grouped into one, the conservatives, Republicans, MAGA, all of them, they're all going to be fighting each other because that's the civil war that's coming. And I know we've already talked about how that takes place. And it's going to be a collective between all the intelligence agencies of the world: China, Russia, United States, that would be CIA, FSB, SBU, MSS. What's the one? I need a, because I was wondering this the other day. What was the one? Not Mossad. Mossad would not be part of this. Iran. MOIS. MOIS. MOIS would be the one. It wouldn't be IRGC, Islamic Revolution Guard. It's interesting about this though. You actually get two intelligence services, much like how they're parallel to each other, much like how the United States has the federal government and the U.S. government. They're in these. The two of each of these are going to be against each other. And then you have the MSS intelligence, which is China's Ministry of State Security, People's Republic of China, Secret Police Agency, basically KGB, often likened to a combined CIA and FBI KGB. It manages both domestic surveillance and global espionage with a major focus on industrial cyber espionage and suppressing dissidents abroad under the State Council. Basically, yeah, KGB. At least a mimicry of it, of some sort. Fun fact, we're the only country in the world that does not have a combined CIA or FBI. In ours, it's CIA because of separation of powers, but eventually what's going to happen is those are going to have to merge. Again, through the federal government because they're going to get that much power. And it's going to actually throw out the entire U.S. Constitution as it should be done. It led us to the positions that we are in now. Not only that, but it was also it points to monarchies and all of that. And we talked about that with, what was it, Section 9? Oops. Oh, it could still do it. Because when you type English in Ukrainian or Cyrillic, it knows what you're typing in through translation layers of that and converts it to the what alphabet are we using? It's not the English alphabet. Is it? Is it Latin? Is it Latin alphabet? Is that what we're using? Yeah, it's Section 9, Clause 8. Powers denied Congress. Powers denied Congress. Hang on, let me read this. Powers denied Congress. See, it's just weird, even saying powers denied Congress. So they're saying that kings are denied Congress. King, prince. We talked about all that. It's so ambiguous. So ambiguous. What? Oops. I know what it says up there. We're typing in coded languages. We're typing code. Yeah, I decided to press the switch to language button. Yeah, that's not how you say it in Ukrainian, but that's what it would say on the keyboard. The English language uses the Latin or Roman alphabet. Like I said that, Latin. I wasn't sure. I know it wasn't Greek. We're learning all kinds of things today. Like we started from the Civil War to now we're learning about the English alphabet, the Latin alphabet, the English language. So, anyways, that's all I need to talk about. And I'll see you guys in the next one, which would be the Q&A, the monthly Q&A that I do on the 20th. This video is going to go out on April 16th. So, actually, this would be the 6th. We got 6 more years until 2033. Is that it? 7 years, but we go down 1, so it'd be 6. That's interesting because I just typed that in and I see this. The 200th anniversary of Christ's resurrection, the church's birth, and the giving of the Great Commission. What is the significance of 2033 in the Bible? Marks the 20th anniversary of the death and resurrection of Jesus. Pentecost, birth of the church. It is widely considered a milestone year of celebrating 20 centuries of Christianity and focusing on the global evangelism and unity, often dubbed JC 2033, or a Jubilee of Hope. So it's interesting how I just put 2026, 2023, and it all only shows this. Well, meant it as an equation, but it's interpreting, I guess, part of the 7 years as well. The Great Tribulation is 7 years long. So right now, actually, now that I bring this up, I mentioned that April 14th is in 2033 is the day that this all takes place. So in April 14th of, so before I even post release this for you see this, which is going to be scheduled for April 16th. But between the time that I'm recording this and release this on schedule, this will be 6 years. But you're going to have April 14th right there in between this. So, between the scheduling and me recording this. So, I don't know what's going to happen on April. I don't think anything's going to happen on April 14th. There might be a mention of it somewhere. Trump probably says something. But outside of that, we're going to be in the Great Tribulation somewhere in. But of course, based on my numbers and all that, if this is 6 years coming, 7th year would be last year. So I don't think there's going to be anything big. Because Great Tribulation didn't happen until... That started in 2022, and that's the Ukraine War. So, everything here is just going to be a mockery of what's going on over there. But, anyways, I'll end it here, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye for now.